Good evening. Hi. Well, I hope you had a good week. Um, it's been a very busy week for us here. We had a lot of deliveries this week, a lot of things coming in, and I don't know actually. I think for the first time in a long time, just felt a little bit disorganized about it all. One of the things about being locked down is it's always been very sort of structured, which is actually quite unusual for me. And so I've sort of felt like I've had a bit more order in the general chaos of my existence. But this last week, it sort of reverted to type. And it was pretty full on. It's the last but one Sunday to Christmas. Next week will be the final Sunday, and then Christmas will be upon us. And I guess it's been now the driving thing in the media for a while, but even in kind of church circles, lots of people are beginning, their heads are turning, and they're really starting to think about their Christmas preparations. And so I was sort of going to ask you the question: how's your Christmas preparations going? You know, what plans have you got? How are you dealing with the various restrictions or the circumstances that you're in this year? And then I thought, no, you know what? Scratch that. If there's one thing that actually I'm sure of every year, not just after this really difficult, traumatic, and challenging year of 2020, it's that Christmas isn't for everybody a time where the greatest concern is whether or not they'll have enough turkey for the family dinner. Christmas is ultimately just one day a year, one day unto which our society, and yeah, religious folk you might externally at least say we're a bit like me and the people of Harvest, load with meaning, with pressure, with a suggestion that for everybody there is this idyllic, perfect, flawless, generally very expensive, commercially driven way in which you should celebrate. And of course, that also produces the kickback that people get terribly sort of engaged with the idea that, well, so many of the traditions aren't actually Christian in their origin. Why are you celebrating the birth of Christ in December in any case? It's very unlikely that it was in December, and all of those things. And so the debates rage and the pressure mounts, and whichever side of the discussion you find yourself on, the strain and the stress that comes with it for many is extremely difficult. And that's not even thinking about those for whom the very idea that around them families are gathering when they have no family, or for those families for whom there will be empty seats at the table, or for those for whom every other day of the year is a struggle simply to keep body and soul together. It's just one day, one ordinary day. You get up in the morning, you will be the same person you were on Christmas Eve. And in all likelihood, the same person you'll be on Boxing Day. And so, rather than ask you how your preparations are going and ask you what you have planned, perhaps a better question, perhaps certainly a more compassionate and honest question would be, how are you doing? How are you getting on? How are you emotionally? How do you feel about tomorrow? How do you feel about the next couple of weeks? What are the things that are playing on your mind? What are the things that you're excited about? Are there things that are going to bring you great joy? Are there things that you're worried might not? Are there things you've got planned to surprise and bless people? Have you maybe got a few days planned to just take some time and give yourself some space? I'm absolutely sure that as many people as are listening to this, there are different expectations and experiences, different worries and concerns. And you know what? For all of the arguments amongst theologians, for all of the discussions in society, for all of the media pressure and hype, for all of the traditions which may or may not have any merit to them, the reality is that the question, how are you? Are you okay? you doing well? Do you have peace? Are you confident and hopeful? What are your concerns? Are there things that someone could help you with? Those kind of questions are, in fact, the questions that are on the heart of God. In fact, it's because those sort of questions about your life matter so deeply to Him that what we'll be celebrating as Christians through the Christmas season happened at all. The arrival of God in the person of Jesus Christ, breaking into the scene of time, being born to a teenage couple, living as refugees on the streets of Bethlehem where they had just arrived, is the story of God investing Himself in reaching into our circumstances. It's the story of a God who is so concerned for our well being, spiritually, emotionally, practically, so determined to be able to bless us, to be able to meet us where we are at, that He surrenders all of His comforts, all of His abundance, all of His wealth and riches, all that is His by right. He comes amongst us as the least of us. And He did it because He is deeply, deeply concerned about you and about me. You see, the way in which we choose to remember and how you choose to remember and how we choose to remember, they're deeply personal things. And frankly, they are largely irrelevant. But the thing that as Christians we remember on this one day of the year, in fact, which we acknowledge every time we gather and every time we pray and every time we praise in the whole of our walk, but this one moment is so much more about what we ourselves needed than it is about what we might do. You know, every year around this time, the debate rages, mostly stoked by people who just like to get folks' blood pressure up and start a shouting match in society, whether it's in the press or in the online media or wherever, about being able to celebrate Christmas, being able to say Happy Christmas, being able to acknowledge all the different just nonsense that you hear. And this year, with the different COVID restrictions going on in different parts of the UK and around the world, there have been lots of people who've been very animated, really worked up about whether or not they'll be able to gather or have carol services or to celebrate in some way. Excuse me a second. You know, if you were to read some of the different things that are being written, you'll find people honestly saying that they think that the risks of gathering together are definitely worth it. They're definitely worth it. Now, I don't want to dismiss their sincerity, and where they're at is their business. The more I thought of the various pressures people are under, the debt that people will incur so that they can have just the right sort of celebration, the strain they'll put on their family relationships, the endless stress and just the cost in terms of personal energy and engagement, the more I began to think that the God who abandoned all of His power, all of His rightful authority to take on the form of the very least amongst us, probably doesn't care whether you celebrate it or not. For that one day, God doesn't care whether you sing all of your festive carols, whether you gather in pious huddles. In fact, if you only do it on the one day, the whole thing seems laughably pointless. And I'm not advocating that we have a Christmas celebration 365 days of the year. That way lies madness. But time and again, what the Bible teaches me about what God delights in is it's about a heart that loves him. It's about a person who in their spirit commits themselves to seek him, who loves his presence, who rejoices in his goodness. And so while all around us there are people telling us that we have to have all the lights, and I love Christmas lights, you can tell. They're not particularly thrilling, the ones behind me, but if I was to move the camera around, there's an awful lot going on in here. But the people that tell us we have to have the lights and the turkey, and we have to have the outfits, and we have to make sure that we have the right people around, and that we celebrate. And they're asking us to surrender so much. They're asking us to give our time and our resources and our energy. The more I thought about it, the more I began to contrast that with a God who gave himself, asking nothing in return. And a God who describes himself as having no delight in sacrifice. Now, in the context of the Old Testament, that's speaking very specifically about religious sacrifice. But in the religion of the traditions of Christmas, there's a lot of sacrifice going on. People straining to buy that particular present. People spending the sort of money that would feed a family for months on a single day's worth of partying. People pushing themselves far beyond their limits emotionally and financially, and in this current crisis, straining to try and carry out some activities, and yet the God they say they're celebrating says, I don't delight in sacrifices. And as I was thinking about it, it reminded me of the verse in Micah 6:8 that speaks about what God says is good. This is what it says. He has shown you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. You know, in all the discussions, the debates, the arguments over how things should be celebrated, all the things that have crept into our discussions over these last 12 months of COVID-19 restrictions, and the arguments about masks or not masks, tier lockdowns, and all the different things that have gone on. Should we gather? Should we not gather? There hasn't been a lot of mercy. There hasn't been a lot of mercy in our relationships with one another. And even where there has been a level of restraint, the challenge of this verse is not to simply act mercifully, but to love mercy. We should think about that when we're engaging with people that maybe are not having the festive season that we are, maybe won't have the celebrations that we do, maybe are feeling a loss that we have not experienced. We should think about that when we are surrounded by people who are frightened for the future, people who are concerned about their well-being, people who are concerned about their loved ones. We should think about that. when other people get great joy or attribute significance to traditions which to us seem foolhardy, or as though they somehow conflict with our personal view of how we remember. Above all else, the thing that God requires of us this Christmas is not the great show of religious celebration, but that each one of us walks humbly with our God. You know, if it was just walking humbly, I think this verse wouldn't be such a challenge, but it also wouldn't contain such a promise. You see, to walk humbly with God, requires that God has made himself available for us to walk with him. What does the Lord require of you? What does God want? What would God love more than anything else? Well, do justly, love mercy, but walk with him. Walk in humility with the God who loves you, the God who gave himself for you, the God who you claim to be celebrating. In amongst all the noise and the paraphernalia, and if you're going to have a great big Christmas gathering because you're in a place where you're able to do that, or if it's just going to be you on your own, choose God over all the other trappings of Christmas. Now, Sundays we've been doing a series just studying the incarnation, and the heart of the incarnation is a person. The person of Jesus Christ, God walking amongst us, God choosing to be with us. And so whether you choose to gather or not to gather, whether you choose to don your mask and go and meet in a socially distanced or car park carol service, or you don't, whether you choose to give extraordinary gifts to people to show them how much you're missing them because you've not been able to see them as much as you would normally, or you don't, whether you engage in acts of social action or charitable kindness, or you don't, whether you just want to pull the covers over your head and forget about the whole thing, or you don't. Above all else, as we go into these last few days, less than 2 weeks now to Christmas, and as we prepare for our own experience of that remembering, know that for all 365 days of the year, the desire of God is that you and him should be companions, that you should choose to walk alongside him, and he will not be looking for you to bring some great impressive offering, some spectacular demonstration of what you're prepared to surrender up for the sake of that gathering, because he has made a way that you, as you are, just the way you are, can come and can enter into his presence, and can approach him, and can walk with him. So, if you have great preparations, well, God bless you. Have a wonderful time. If you have no preparations, that's okay. God bless you. I pray that you have a blessed and wonderful time. If you're frightened and concerned about what it's going to feel like because of all the loss and the difficulties and the loneliness and the emotional things that I think many of us are going to suffer through this Christmas season, God bless you. I pray that you have a peaceful time, and that in your sorrow or loss, you are comforted. And in your isolation, you know the presence of the God who loves you. But whatever these next few days look like for you, whatever you have planned for the last weekend before Christmas, above all else, I pray that you walk with God, because his heart is for you, and he's made a way for you to know that peace, that joy, and that relationship. We'll be back next Sunday night. I'm not quite sure yet what we're going to do through Christmas week itself, but we'll be back next Sunday night. And in the meantime, you can find out underneath these videos how to get in touch with us. We just really will be pleased to pray with you, pray for you. If there's any things that you want to talk about, that's great. If you just want to say hello, we'd really appreciate that. And I pray you have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday night. And we'll let you know a little bit next Sunday night about what we've got planned for Christmas week itself. God bless.